Hello, Symposiast. I had a great experience last Saturday to go to the Witchfest, where I was invited as a speaker to give a talk on Chaos Magick. I spent most of the time attending talks and chatting with Professor Alan Hutton, who's also my mentor, and I also had great fun seeing Dam the Bard and the Incubus Succubus. So I wanted to share my talk with you guys and thank the Witchfest organizers for making such an amazing event possible and available to everybody. Before we dive into my talk, allow me to remind you to sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date with everything that I do and not rely on the capricious algorithm. And also, please, if you like this project of delivering free academic scholarship, consider supporting my work with a one-off PayPal donation by joining memberships, my inner symposium on Patreon and Ko-fi, super thanking me in the comments, or checking out my services and at drangelapuca.com. Every type of help is fully appreciated. Also, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, activate the notification bell, and share this video around. Also, let me know in the comments what you think about it. All right, let the symposium begin. Thank you very much to the Witchfest organization for inviting me. As it was just mentioned, it is my first time at Witchfest, so I'm really excited, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Dr. Angela Puca. I'm a religious studies PhD, and I'm an academic. I lecture at university and publish, and I also have a project of online dissemination of academic knowledge on topics in esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult, because I think that it is also important to disseminate to a wider public academic scholarship, which tends to be quite obscure. So that is part of my project. Today, I will be talking about Chaos Magick. Chaos Magick is a subject that tends to be quite popular, at least online, and there isn't much scholarship on it from an academic point of view, although there are a few references. Let's start with Chaos Magick then. So Chaos Magick was in effect created by Peter Carroll and Ray Sherwin, and he was founded in the UK. The book that has, or the books that have then become one book that are quite foundational to Chaos Magick and its practice and its philosophy is Liber Null and Psychonaut, which was published in 1978. However, there are substantial influences in Chaos Magick, and we find definitely influences. In fact, this could be seen as the founding fathers of Chaos Magick in Aleister Crowley, Austin Osman Spare, and Kenneth Grant. They've all been quite influential, and we can definitely discuss it further. Crowley was particularly influential because, as we will see, Chaos Magick takes some of the elements that we find in Aleister Crowley. So, for instance, the psychologizing that we find in Crowley, especially in early Crowley. I know that Crowley is not particularly consistent. He's not a particularly consistent author, but for instance, when Crowley talks about the Holy Guardian Angel in the early part of his writings, it tends to refer to something that is more psychological, whereas in later writings, he tends to think about entities more generally as more physical and ontologically real. So, whereas with Austin Osman Spare, the big influence that he has had on Chaos Magick was definitely in the creation of sigils. We know that especially the Book of Pleasure by Austin Osman Spare has been particularly influential, and a lot of the philosophy of Chaos Magick and the practice as well, especially when it comes to sigil magic, is drawn from Austin Osman Spare. So, among the very few academic sources that we find on Chaos Magick, there's definitely Bernd-Christian Otto, who has recently published on Chaos Magick, and he has also worked with Ralph Tenkmeyer and with Chaos Magick groups in Germany. Otherwise, there are very few papers on Chaos Magick in the UK, so it is still, there isn't much at the moment in terms of academic scholarship, but hopefully over time there's going to be more. And Bernd-Christian Otto describes the early stages of chaos magic as a loose network. And which is interesting because then you find that there was the creation of the Illuminates of Thanateros, which also marked a pivotal point in the foundation and also in the spreading of chaos magic. Let's now look at the philosophy of chaos magic, which I find to be quite interesting. And I think it has had many ramifications in both in pagan spaces as well as in more generally in esoteric communities. Chaos magic has been described by the few scholars who have studied it, as a left-hand path, or one of the traditions within the left-hand path umbrella. The left-hand path tends to be a sort of an umbrella term. We really like umbrella terms in the spaces of paganism and esoteric practices. The left-hand path is an umbrella term that tends to gather within itself a set of traditions that have certain elements in common. And these elements are individualism, self-deification, a focus on the here and now, and also antinomianism. Individualism is a focus on the self, a focus on the self-development, and even when the practice is aimed at affecting the world around you, it still tends to do so by affecting the self primarily, and then the world as a reflection of that. You have also the concept in the left-hand path traditions of self-deification, which means that one of the aims of the practice is becoming a living God in a way. So it is a process of apotheosis, of becoming a god. That's what self-deification means. Also, there is a focus on the here and now in the sense that you don't have generally philosophies that have to do with end times or with the metaphysical world, where there are metaphysical beliefs, but they are still rooted in the here and now. And what is of primary importance is the here and now, is not what comes after, is not really what goes beyond. And even the metaphysical is interpreted in relation to the physical. So the here and now is very much essential. And also you have the concept of antinomianism. Antinomianism is the rejection of norms and the rejection of authority. So it is that's why that's also another element that plays into the individualism and also the self-deification. In fact, left-hand path comes from the Vamachara Marga, from these Sanskrit terms that refers to certain tantric traditions that tend to be more antinomian, even though there is definitely a difference between how the left-hand path has been interpreted and conceptualized in the Western world as opposed to how it is conceived in the Asian context. So it's also important to mention that. So there are three very interesting foundational concepts that we find in chaos magic. One is perennialism. And perennialism is the idea of a perennial philosophy that underlies all religions, all philosophies. So the idea is that there is one core, you could say, truth, one core element, foundation that underlies all religions, all practices. And in a way, the layers that you find in the different religions and the different traditions is almost concealing, almost veiling that underlying truth that you find across the board. So this is the perennialist perspective. This is something that you don't only find in chaos magic. In fact, it tends to be quite prevalent in different esoteric communities or magic practicing traditions. This idea of perennialism you find also when different gods and goddesses are perceived as one. It is an idea that you can find also in Wiccan spaces when they say that all gods are one god and all goddesses are one goddess. So there's this perennialist perspective that you can, all the differences that you find, the cultural differences, are somewhat veiling an underlying truth that actually all of them share. So there is also a search for this sense of truth, although in chaos magic is extremely individual, extremely personal. Then you have the iconoclasm, which links well with the left-hand path concept of antinomianism, because iconoclasm refers to destroying images, icons, idols of religious culture. One of the things that I find fascinating in Chaos Magick is the fact that they have a very soft polytheistic approach. You can think of hard and soft polytheism as hard polytheism is the belief that gods and entities are ontologically real and independent of us. And soft polytheism is the idea that gods or entities that the practitioner works with, they could be archetypes, they could be forces of nature, they could be, in a way, dependent on us. So you have this spectrum, and it is a spectrum. I mean, it's not necessarily an either or, and the practitioner can move between these two extremes of the spectrum. But definitely in this sense, in the spectrum of soft and hard polytheism, Chaos Magick is definitely on the soft side, to the point where the gods and goddesses can even be created for the purpose of specific rituals. So there is the sense that you can make up deities, you can create entities. The Antinomianism is the rejection of social and cultural norms in the pursuit of individualized ethics and spiritual evolution. It's very interesting how this is mentioned and phrased in Chaos Magick, because it is not it's not a rejection of the rules for the sake of rejecting the rules. It is a rejection of the rules to challenge the self that you have created. So this is an element that you find also in tantric traditions in Asia. Although it's always important to say that even though there are similarities, they are conceptualized in different ways. But the idea of rejecting social norms and social rules and doing things that are taboo is a tantric practice that is done for the purpose of self-elevation and self-discovery. Because the point is that the norms that you have may be useful for day-to-day life, but when you see them from a religious or a spiritual point of view, they might become chains. In fact, one other thing that is considered a chain in Chaos Magick is the Aristotelian logics, the idea that contradictions must be avoided. That is considered a chain. So even following the rules of logic can be seen as a chain in a Chaos Magick perspective. But these are all things that have a certain aim, and the aim is that of discovering your pure potential. Everything, when you strip down all these norms, all these rules, even having to abide by the principle of non-contradiction of Aristotelian ethics, what is left of you, what is left of your essence, of your core, of your self, when all of these are removed? And Chaos Magick tries to dive into that core question, and it tries to enter that essence, that nucleus that tends to be covered by ritualism, religious traditions, social norms, even logics, and trying to be non-contradictory. All of these are, there's an exercise into removing all of these layers and discovering what is left. In fact, one of the things that is quite interesting that I find in Chaos Magick is that in other esoteric traditions and magic practicing traditions, you find that you always try to find the right correspondence, the right ritual, the right set of herbs and oils and the deity to work with, everything that would affect, that would be effective for your magical practice. Chaos Magick does the opposite. Instead of trying to find the right ritual, they try to strip all the ritualistic elements to its absolute core. Because the idea is that since part of the core philosophy of Chaos Magick is the idea of Kia, which is, and also the concept of chaos is this undetermined, unrealized potential that we can all source from. And this concept that you find from Austin Osman's pair of the Kia and the Zos. Zos is the individual person, and the Kia is this, in a way, the absolute, the pure potential. And the fact that we, having become individuals, we have detached from this absolute, pure potential. And we need to rejoin that. So here, in this kind of philosophical view, it comes quite natural to see that any type of ritualism is actually reaffirming the self, is reaffirming the identity and the separation from the kia. So it is a way of reinforcing the zos, the nucleus that is in a state of separation. So if you want to get connected with the source, with the original source, what is suggested that you should do in Chaos Magick is exactly the opposite. So instead of doing all sorts of rituals, it is more about doing as little as possible to allow that connection to occur. Some key elements that we find here are the idea of Gnosis, for instance, which is a state where the boundaries between subject and object fade. We find that Gnosis is a term that is used and sometimes overused in esoteric magic practicing traditions. And every tradition seems to have their own interpretation of what Gnosis means. For some people it is, well, for some traditions, we could say, because every tradition has a different interpretation. Of course, the Gnosis of the way Gnostics would have understood Gnosis is very different from Hermetic philosophy and is very different from Chaos Magick. In Chaos Magick, the idea of Gnosis is this state where the boundaries between subject and object fade. And also the single-pointed focus is believed to pierce through to affect changes to one's reality. There are some of these elements that you find, certain practices, to sharpen your magical skills that are found in Chaos Magick that are clearly see influences from Aleister Crowley and from Asian traditions. So the single-pointed focus is something that you definitely find in yoga, the ekagrata in Sanskrit, and it is something that Crowley also talks about. Crowley talks a lot about yoga and yogic practices in the first part of his book, Magic in Theory and Practice, and how those can help develop magical skills. So the single-pointed focus is something that in Chaos Magick they say that you need to exercise over and over so that your skills become sharpened over time. And the idea is to focus on one single object without any other interference so that your mind can be trained to become hyper-focused. And when it is hyper-focused, it is believed that it's more powerful because it's the same as how effective can be the scattered light of the sun at burning something, not very effective, unless it's somewhere in Italy. But when you have the sun that is filtered through a magnifying glass, it can burn a piece of paper quite easily. So the more focused the mind is, the more powerful it becomes. And for that purpose, there are exercises that are recommended in Chaos Magick to do quite frequently so that you can develop those skills. For instance, as I said, focusing on one object or repeating a mantra. These are things that you find also in Indian traditions and that are incorporated in Chaos Magick. Also, Kia, as I was mentioning earlier, is an essential concept that we find in Chaos Magick because it is the life force through which the practitioner can shape reality through the manipulation of their own consciousness, and by extension, the universal consciousness that is represented by Kia. Now, what is interesting is that in Chaos Magick, they definitely tend to incorporate a psychologizing understanding of magic practices, but it is elaborated in a very unique way. So if you think about it, so we have this idea that we are these individual entities, the Zos, that are separated from the Kia, and if we manage to get reattuned and united with the Kia, with this absolute potential, then we can perform magical acts in the reality and affect reality. Now, the thing is that if you do too many rituals, you are in a way more immersed into the self aspect, in the individualized element of the Zos. So you need to get reconnected with this absolute force. So rituals are stripped to the core. And one thing that is used quite often in Chaos Magick is sigils. So with sigils, you have the idea that they are physical tokens that represent the magical intention of chaos magicians. And I don't know if you're familiar with how sigils are made. Let me see if I can. So here you have representation of sigils as it is presented in this PhD dissertation. And you have the idea that you write what it is that you're trying to achieve in your reality, and then you delete all the repeated letters and vowels, and then it is stripped down to the letters that are left, and those letters are rearranged in an artistic way so that they can in a way, they can be activated and charged, because another aspect of the ritual is to charge the sigil once it is formed. And then the concept here is that the sigil gets deposited in your unconscious mind, and you have to forget about it. You have to forget about it so that your unconscious or subconscious, which is more connected with the Kia, is more connected with this force of absolute potential, can do its magic, so to speak, and allow you to achieve the things that you have, that you want to achieve in your life. So these are a few examples that you see here. So this is quite interesting in that, so the sigil is created, is something that is very essential, and as you can see, there isn't much ritualism, although there are chaos magicians that would also use rituals, and they would also use correspondences. And one different element that you find with chaos chaos magicians using correspondences is that those wouldn't be drawn from books or other people's experiences, but they try and create their own correspondences. So they might create their own correspondences. For instance, if to me the color red resonates with, I don't know, the element water, for instance, for whatever reason. Maybe for me there is an association with blood, and then red becomes my color correspondence for water. So there's more renegotiation of correspondences. Even when they are used, they are not used, and this is also probably the antinomian element of not following what is in the books or is in the grimoires, but more trying to, in a way, destroy all these conventions, try to see what is left when all these conventions and norms are left aside, and discover what are the correspondences that resonate with you. Because there is, in a way, a direct connection with, I wouldn't say the divine, but it could be seen as a conceptualization of the divine. It is a direct connection with the Kia. It is a direct connection with this state of chaos, absolute potential that we all are connected to. It's just that we are connected to it in a very individual way. So that's why there is an emphasis on individualism, which some may speculate isn't that something that would lead to solipsism. And if you are not familiar with the term, solipsism is just a word where only you exist, basically. There isn't an acknowledgement of other people. And of course, you will find different views depending on chaos magicians, but I wouldn't say that the way it is conceptualized is solipsistic. It's more a way of seeing the world from the lens of the self. So other people and the world exist, but the most effective way to affect the world and even affect your community, if that is what you want to do, is via the self, because that is where you find the most direct connection with the Kia, with this powerful force of absolute potential. Let's see how chaos magic also influences paganism. Chaos magic has a peculiar position, perhaps, because it sits between ceremonial magic and witchcraft, and it has influenced both. And also, there are certain values that are present in chaos magic, like personal empowerment, autonomy, and self-realization. And it is also results-focused. So there's the famous quote in chaos magic, "Nothing is true, everything is permitted." So experimentation is encouraged. It's also interesting to speculate about the the view of the world that you may have in Chaos Magick, whether it is a form of active nihilism, as I would call it, because it really reminds me a lot of Nietzsche and Friedrich Nietzsche. So it's an idea of usually when we think about nihilism, we tend to think about something depressing and having no meaning in life and being sad all the time. But nihilism actually just means literally, even though it has been interpreted in a certain way in continental philosophy by certain existentialists, but nihilism means that nothing exists in itself ontologically. So that doesn't imply that nothing exists in appearance. So there's a difference between ontology and phenomenology. So things may not exist in and of themselves, and that would be nihilism, but they might appear to our experience. And that is the concept that you find here. So you have things, people, occurrences, anything that happens in experience, but you cannot really say that anything exists in and of itself. So and nihilism is the idea that nothing exists ontologically, meaning that it actually exists independent of anything. Things appear to experience, to our experience, but they appear in the state that they appear. So in a codependent state, they would say in Buddhism. And in Nietzsche, you find the idea of active nihilism, which is the idea that if nothing exists in and of itself, and the only things that I'm able to access in my experience, it is literally just my experience. So if nothing is absolutely true or absolutely real in absolute sense, then I can make what I want of it. I can make what I want of the reality, since you don't really have an absolute reality, but you have more of a relative reality or a transsubjective reality, because it is shared among individuals, but you cannot say that it exists in absolute terms, because, and I'm going more into Kantian territory with Immanuel Kant and the idea of the phenomenon and the noumenon, the idea that the only thing that you can see of the world is what appears to your senses, but everything that appears to you is always filtered. It is filtered by your senses because they are able to see and hear things, but not others. There's only a spectrum of things that you can see, that you can hear. And we even know that because of the scientific discoveries around it. We also have the internal filters of our mind, because according to Kant, everything gets filtered through the primary category of space and time. So everything that gets into us is filtered has all these filters. And you can never really access the noumenon, you can never really access the thing in itself. What is in front of you that is not filtered. You never have access to that, and that's the limit of our knowledge, according to Kant. And this has influenced later philosophers that I think have been influential also in Chaos Magick and in this idea of active nihilism. So it's not a denial of the appearance of things, it's a denial or in some cases even an agnosticism, like a suspension of judgment, in that I cannot really say that I exist as a separate entity. I cannot say that individuals exist as separate entities. I can only say what appears to my senses. I can only say what appears to me, what appears to us, and try and identify a pattern, but that is still a pattern of what is, or what manifests, rather than what it is, regardless and beyond all these filters that we have as human beings. So in acknowledgement of this, in a Chaos Magick philosophy, the idea is that, okay, so nothing is true or can be proven to be true, as in ontologically real, independent of anyone saying it. So everything is permitted in that, magically speaking, and if I want to create my reality, then that's allowed. So there's a perception of, since there is no essential foundational thing in the world that can be said to be truth, that can be said to be true regardless of me perceiving it, then I can make of it what I want via magic. And in this case, you have the concept, as I mentioned, of Kia and sourcing from that primary potential to affect changes in our reality. So I recently interviewed Peter Carroll for my YouTube channel, so if you're interested, you will find it there. And I thought it was very interesting because I asked a question about AI and technology and the use of technology in Chaos Magick. And he said, we have a joke maxim in Chaos Magick that runs, make your own servitors, don't play around with demons from grimoires. You don't know where they've been. So I find this really funny when he said that. But I think this kind of sums up a certain concept that you have in Chaos Magick. So we have discussed about the Antinomianism in Chaos Magick and how that links to the idea of not following the rules, not following the norms, so that you can freely discover your potential and you can freely experiment with yourself in the world and with the lack of self by reuniting with the Kia and allowing your magic power and your magic skills to be effective. But this, I think, also explains, this quotation also highlights another element that we find for which antinomianism and not respecting the rules, not following what is in grimoires, not following rituals written by others unless they resonate with you, and it is something that is that really can be, that you feel to be part of your own practice. This highlights another element, and that is that when you use grimoires and things driven from grimoires, whether it be rituals or demons or entities, you don't know what you are working with because the information that you will find in grimoires is always going to be partial. So they would say in Chaos Magick that it might be better, more beneficial to create your own deities, to create your own servitors, to create your own the entities that you work with. And the creation can be a creation of a completely made-up entity. So, for instance, if I have a colleague that is sucking the life out of me, I can see them as a vampire, and I can make up Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a deity and work with her in a ritual to save myself from this colleague. So this would be an example of making up a deity based on individual correspondences, because perhaps for me, the closest correspondence between somebody that is very draining could be a vampire. For somebody else, it could be something else. And also the correspondence about who could fight the most effectively a vampire, for me, is Buffy, of course, but for you, it might be some other character or something else entirely. So the essence here is that the concept is that, okay, I am united, even though I feel the separation from the primary source, from the Kia, that it's the absolute potential. I need to reconnect with this absolute force of potential. And the best way to do it is by leveraging on my own direct experience, as opposed to, because if I follow what is written in grimoires, I'm following perhaps what was effective for somebody else, what resonated with somebody else, not with me personally. And since everybody is believed in Chaos Magick to have a direct access to this potential, then it makes more sense in that it is more direct to find what resonates with you as a practitioner. And also, it's also considered more dangerous, as you can tell. And Peter Carroll also proved to be skeptical about the use of technology in Chaos Magick during the interview. You find the full thing on my YouTube channel. It was quite fascinating. But another thing that matches in the academic literature when it comes to Chaos Magick, and there are other new religious movements and historic traditions that apply this principle, is the idea of what the academic Stringer called, or Stringer, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but he called it situational belief. And Carol Cusack calls it provisional belief. So it is a very similar concept that has been elaborated with different terms by these scholars. And the idea is that, and it's interesting because with Stringer, he was finding this idea of situational belief among Christians. So it was not a study on contemporary magic practices, whereas Carol Cusack definitely works with invented religions and new religious movements. So I find this concept incredibly fascinating, the idea of provisional belief and situational belief, the idea that you believe insofar as it is effective for whatever purpose or whatever aim you have. And this reflects brilliantly what happens in Chaos Magick. I think that it tends to be quite true of most esoteric traditions, that experience comes first and belief comes after. So I find that in magic practicing traditions, including, of course, paganism, there's more, pagans tend to be much more likely to amend their belief system in accordance with their experience, or even in accordance to new evidence that emerge. So for instance, if something was believed to be historical and factual, and then there's new history or new scholarship that comes up, pagans are quite quite sensitive to new discoveries and adjust their belief system, because the experience is more important. The experience comes first and the belief comes after. Sometimes the belief serves the purpose of explaining the experience. In other cases, it has the role of enabling the experience. And in the case of Chaos Magick, the belief has definitely the purpose of enabling the experience. And in that sense, it makes sense that the belief that you endorse, the belief that you espouse, are beliefs that are provisional. So insofar as holding this belief allows me to get to the aim that I want, then I will believe it. If it doesn't work anymore, or if it doesn't serve my purpose anymore, I'm just gonna discard this belief. So it tends to be very fluid in terms of the belief system. It's not really settled in stone, and clearly not dogmatic, because being antinomian, it would be surprising to see it as something that that follows a certain path and endorses a belief system in a continuous way. So I think that this is one of the things that are found in Chaos Magick that are very, very interesting, even from a philosophical point of view and from a scholarly point of view, the adoption of these provisional beliefs and situational beliefs, and how belief is in service of the experience as opposed to the experience having to match this metaphysical construction that you have. And this tends to happen more with dogmatic religions than with paganism, although even with paganism, you find that different pagan traditions tend to have a certain metaphysical, theological construction. Then you have that rituals tend to be shaped after that sort of construction. But still, I would say that paganism tends to be definitely more fluid in terms of the belief system and in terms of reshaping the belief system in accordance with new found scholarship or experiences that might not match those beliefs. But with Chaos Magick, you have a step further, perhaps. And it is a step that I also found in my research with some pagans. There are some pagans, especially those who are not traditional, who don't follow a specific tradition or a specific traditional path, but they are more eclectic and tend to individually tailor their own practice. I find that even in paganism, these concepts that you find in Chaos Magick and then later has spread and has had influences across different traditions, or even to individuals that are interested in practicing magic or have generally speaking, a pagan belief system. But this has influenced a lot eclectic pagans, in that eclectic pagans often, as I have found in my fieldwork, in my research, I'm an anthropologist of religion. So I found that eclectic pagans especially tend to not espouse a specific or commit to a specific belief system. They are very fluid and the experience definitely comes first. I think that this is true generally, but the more traditional you are, even within paganism, the more there is, you perceive a belief system that tends to, I wouldn't say dominate, but dictate to an extent, to different extents, the practice and the rituals that are constructed. Even the idea, for instance, in Wicca and in early Wicca of the goddess and the god that would affect, of course, the ritualistic practice. And Chaos Magick would say, oh, you know, maybe it might serve for a specific ritual to have a goddess and a god, and might not serve for another, depending on whatever it is that we need to achieve. So I think that it's very fascinating the way that, from a philosophical point of view as well. And I always find that, and I think this is something that lots of scholars focus on, is the fact that when you study a practice, a religious practice, a spiritual practice, nothing is developed in a vacuum. Things are always immersed in a specific view of the world, in a view of the self, in a way of being a society. And that's why the study of religion is so important and unfortunately so underestimated and underfunded in universities, because it is seen as something that is not useful, but in fact it allows us to understand human beings, society, how we interact with each other, and all the things that really allow us to be in the world in the way that we are in the world. So that has ramifications in all other areas that are conventionally seen as more useful and worthy of funding when it comes to research. So I don't have much time left, but it's good to point out that the IoT, the Illuminates of Thanateros, was the tradition that was founded by Peter Carroll, and it was founded in 1986, and is the flagship of Chaos Magick, despite conflict and the Ice Magic War that happened between Peter J. Carroll and Tank Meyer. You find a dedicated video on the Ice Magic War on my YouTube channel. It's very gossipy, but quite interesting. And it has a worldwide membership, even though Peter Carroll is not part of the IoT anymore. But I thought it was worth mentioning. And it's also interesting to mention that the name Thanateros is a combination of the two Greek terms for death and passionate love, Thanatos and Eros, which are passionate love and death. So thank you all so much. I want to also leave you my references. You will find them on my YouTube channel if you want to dive into this further in terms of the academic scholarship that you find. And these are my contact details and where you can find me. And I hope this was useful. Thank you so much.